My name is Lucy. I'm standing in a courtroom filled with reporters and advocates, the air thick with tension. My sister sits at the defense table, her eyes hollow and devoid of the spark she once had. My mom looks older, scanning the room for sympathy but finding none. My dad is nowhere to be seen. Word has it he skipped town after I sold the house. I remember the day I decided to take a stand. It was a normal day at first, or so I thought. My niece, Lily, a 19-year-old aspiring TikTok star, was in the middle of filming a video. The room was filled with ring lights and the smell of lip gloss. My baby, Ethan, was in the corner, his tiny body hooked up to an oxygen monitor. He was born premature, barely 4 pounds, his lungs as fragile as a mist. I noticed the oxygen monitor was unplugged. The wires were dangling like forgotten promises. I moved towards the outlet to plug it back in, but my sister, Sarah, who is 25, barked at me, "Don't touch that." My fingers froze just an inch from the plug. My mom, Linda, a 50-year-old who always put convenience first, waved her hand and said, "She needs to post her TikTok. This beeping can wait." Ethan began to twitch. The monitor started to scream, but they just rolled their eyes. Lily smirked and said, "She's being dramatic again," as she spun into another choreographed pose. Then, Ethan's face turned blue, his chest rising and falling like a broken machine. My dad, Robert, a 52-year-old with a cold heart, didn't even flinch. He muttered, "Maybe it's better this way. Weak ones don't deserve to live anyway." That was the moment something inside me broke. It wasn't a loud, sharp break, but a soft click, like the sound of a woman deciding she's never going back. I reached out to reconnect the monitor, but Sarah grabbed my wrist in mid-air. "Don't ruin her moment," she said. I looked at her, the woman I used to share secrets with, and all I saw were her cold, hard teeth. I didn't scream or plead. Instead, I stepped back, took out my phone, and hit record. I whispered into the phone, "911, my child can't breathe, and my family just unplugged his life to charge a phone." As the siren screamed through the speaker, Lily twirled again, laughing because she didn't know what was coming. But I did. The paramedics arrived in just 3 minutes, but in that moment of betrayal, it felt like a lifetime. I watched them push past the ring lights and glitter. My mom gasped as if she were the victim and tried to pull one of them back, saying, "Wait. Wait. It's just a misunderstanding." I pointed to the still unplugged and lifeless monitor, and then to Ethan, his tiny body trembling in the corner with blue lips. He stopped breathing. "The outlet was used to charge a phone," I said, my voice steady. The medic glanced at the charger, then at the half-lit screen showing a paused TikTok draft, and then at my dad. Maybe it was the way he didn't look away, didn't flinch, as if guilt was a foreign language to him. They swarmed Ethan. One worked on the oxygen, one checked his vitals, and another turned to me and said, "You did the right thing. If you hadn't called, he might not have made it." That's when I heard the video still playing on my phone. It was my recording, not the TikTok. Every word was there, mom's indifference, dad's cruelty, Sarah's grip, the laughter, and the truth. Lily walked over, finally catching on. "You didn't actually send that, did you?" she asked. I turned my phone so she could see it uploading to the drive, to the cloud, and backing up. I whispered, "Not yet." The police showed up moments later. Mom tried to defend herself, saying, "She's exaggerating. That monitor's always beeping. We didn't mean any harm." But the officers weren't listening to her. They were listening to Ethan's faint, gasping breaths and the medic saying, "Get child protective on the line. This is beyond neglect." My dad finally spoke up, "You called the cops on your own family?" I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You unplugged my son's lungs for a TikTok." Then I handed the officer my phone. "Everything's on here," I said. He took it and nodded. In that moment, I realized the silence I had swallowed my whole life was about to choke them. By nightfall, the house felt like a crime scene. Yellow tape was over the nursery door, the same door my mom had painted yellow when I brought Ethan home from the NICU. She stood outside, pacing and crying, not for Ethan, but for herself. "They're treating us like criminals," she hissed. Lily was still filming, whispering to her followers on live, "My aunt's trying to ruin my life." I didn't respond because I was busy printing legal copies of the footage on 3 flash drives. One was already in my lawyer's hands. Ethan was in the hospital, stable and breathing. The nurse said he flinched when anyone turned off the lights because his last memory of home was blue skin and no air. I stood by his side and said, "Not again. Not ever." I opened my email and sent one to Child Services, one to the local news, and one to the talent agency Lily had been begging to notice her. The subject line was behind the filter, "The truth about your newest influencer." I attached the uncut clip. I didn't need to add a caption, the footage spoke for itself. By morning, the video had over 4 million views. The comments were scathing. People were saying things like, "She stepped over a dying baby for content and this family doesn't need therapy, they need charges." By noon, reporters were outside their house. Sarah called me, crying. "You ruined her future," she said. I replied, "She tried to end mine," and then I hung up. By the end of the day, the talent agency released a statement. "We do not support or represent individuals involved in child endangerment. Effective immediately, all partnerships are terminated." The ring lights in their home dimmed, but my world started to brighten. The voice that had told me to stay quiet all my life was now echoing across the internet, demanding justice. In the courtroom, the judge looked over the documents and then leaned back. "I've reviewed the footage, the hospital records, and the CPS reports," she said. Her gaze swept across my family. "I have one question for the defendants. What part of that child's suffering did you find funny?" No one answered, not even my mother. My lawyer stood up and said, "Your Honor, we're requesting full restraining orders, a no-contact clause, and immediate placement on the child neglect registry." The judge nodded slowly. "Granted, effective immediately." Mom gasped, "You can't do this. We're family." I stood up and said, "No, we're a bloodline. Family requires humanity." I handed over one last envelope to the court officer. The judge raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "A second video," I said, dated months earlier. It was footage from a baby cam they didn't know I still had. It showed my dad tossing a blanket over Ethan's incubator to shut him up, Sarah yelling at me for turning the oxygen back on, and my mom shrugging and sipping wine. The court gasped. The judge banged the gavel. "I'm elevating this case to criminal negligence. An investigation will proceed immediately." And just like that, the people who unplugged my child for a dance video were now facing felony charges. Outside, reporters gathered. My lawyer asked me if I wanted to give a statement. I looked at the cameras and whispered, "Tell them I'm not a hero. I'm just a mother who finally pressed play." Now, a year has passed. Ethan walks now, with wobbly steps and a gummy grin. His hands are in the air like every moment is applause. We moved to a small town where no one calls him that baby from the video. Here, he's just Ethan, strong, curious, and unbroken. The oxygen monitor sits in a shadow box on the wall. The wires are still frayed where I found them, but it's framed like armor. It's a reminder that survival doesn't always roar, sometimes it wheezes first. Mom sent me one last letter. There was no apology, just a line scribbled in shaky ink, "You were never meant to be a mother." She was right. I was meant to be Ethan's. Sarah disappeared from the internet. No brand would touch her. She applied for jobs under new usernames, but it didn't matter. The moment she handed me that silence instead of a plug, she muted her future. I still get messages from strangers, survivors, and women with shaking hands and whisper, "Quiet courage." And I reply to every single one. Because someone once believed me when I couldn't even speak. Now I speak so others don't have to scream. One night, Ethan fell asleep in my arms. His hand wrapped around the pendant I've always worn, the same one he clutched in the NICU. I whispered into the quiet, "Thank you for fighting." To him, to myself, and to every mother who ever picked up a phone instead of looking away. Then I turned off the lights, and the monitor blinked softly in the dark, steady, faithful, and alive.